Welcome back to Grounded, a Train Up Parents podcast. I'm Mark Lell. I'm here with Charles Draper. Charles, today we're going to talk about failure. I've been excited about this all week. Failure, complacency, fear, wasted potential. We're going to talk about growth and how does that growth really happen. And in today's world, many people believe that if I fail, I'm a failure, but failure really isn't the enemy. Complacency, fear, and wasted potential are the enemy. And growth really only happens when we stretch ourselves, we push ourselves out of our comfort zone towards the things that will improve us. And those things are the things we've never done before.
Yeah, I mean, to your first statement, I'm excited about talking about failure. How often do you hear that, right? It just kind of made me cackle. Because, I mean, who gets excited to talk about failure? And no, you're right. There's all kinds of quotes or sayings like "fail forward," and there's just a ton of those. But I mean, there's a lot of truth in that. As we look at failure in our homes, with our kids, even with ourselves, there's times where, as a dad, I just fail. I miss the mark. My anger spikes, my frustration spikes, I respond in a way that I shouldn't. And then there's times where I might fail to meet a goal at work, or to meet a deadline, or to do those kind of things. And so as we look at those things, failure can grow us. There's growth potential there. And there's also warnings there in failure. So there's two different pieces that we'll talk about today. But it's not an enemy, right? Failure isn't the enemy. If we start to struggle and to fail at something, it doesn't mean that we always tuck tail and run. Sometimes it may mean we need to change course. Sometimes it might mean, but failure needs to be something that we look at, we embrace, and we learn from.
I agree, and I understand your point. Most people would find it very strange. There's Mark saying failure is not the enemy. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying that we should be complacent. I'm not saying we shouldn't put forth effort. I'm not saying that we should excuse laziness. But failure in and of itself is not the thing to fear, because if we fear failure, that fear will keep us from growing. It will keep us from the very purpose that God created us for. And we've talked about this over and over again. He created us to worship. He created us to witness. He created us for faithful stewardship. And we need to teach our children, coach our children to stretch, coach our children to learn, to coach our children to grow. And when you fail at something, I look at that when you're actually putting forth effort and you're stretching yourself and you still fail at something, that's an educational opportunity. That's like taking a course at school. That's like taking a course at work. Somebody at work just the other day, they had made a mistake and they thought I was going to be all up into their stuff because they had made a mistake. And yes, it was very irritating. But they didn't make that mistake because they wanted to. They made a mistake.
Yeah.
And are they going to learn from that mistake? Are they positioning themselves to not make that mistake again? And if the answer to that question is yes, why am I going to give them a hard time? I mean, that's just as good, if not better than sending them to a course for 3 weeks.
No, it really is. I mean, in work and an organization, failure is going to happen. But it's how do you respond? What do you do with that? Can we learn through that? Now, if you keep making the same mistake and failing at the same thing time and time again, that becomes an issue because you're not learning from failure. But just because you fail doesn't mean that you're a failure.
That's right.
Right? I'll say that again. Just because you fail doesn't mean you're a failure. We have to protect our kids from that mentality. I failed, so I'm a failure. No, we have to have them stop and reflect and to stretch and to look at their goals, because if we don't do that, what they'll say is, well, I failed at that, I'm a failure, so I'm not going to step back into that space. I'm going to do something easier. I'm going to go the easier route. I've always heard the saying, water will find the path of least resistance, right?
It does.
If we're not careful, our kids will try to find that path of least resistance, which is just the crowd.
And that's failure. So if my child stretches herself and fails because she stretched herself a little too far, that's not failure. What's
right.
failure is stopping the stretch, lowering the goals. When you lower something, when you lower what you do so that you're guaranteed success, that is
right.
failure. So you can be completely successful in the eyes of the world, completely successful in the eyes of your peers, and be a complete failure because you're missing the mark, because you're not utilizing the gifts that you've been given. You're not performing to your optimal standard that you can actually reach.
That's right. No, that's so good. We don't want to lower the bar, but how do we set the standard and keep striving to it, even though it may be this up and down path to get there, right? We're never going to achieve the mark, right? Like we're never going to arrive. If at any point you feel like you've arrived at the goal, then you better be looking around because something's about to come and just floor
Knock you down.
It is about to come, and uppercuts coming from somewhere that you're not expecting. But yeah, I mean, we can't always. The outcome's not always going to be perfect, but it's the growth.
You said how. You asked the question how just now. Our children need coaches. We need coaches.
Yeah.
And in high school, I had a chemistry teacher who had a doctorate, Dr. White, and she taught that class like it was an AP chemistry class, even though it wasn't registered as an AP chemistry class. So she prepared me well for organic chemistry in college. As a matter of fact, I slept through that class in college and made a very good grade for not really paying attention because I'd already went through the stuff. But here's the thing: at the end of that course in high school, she gave out awards, and I got an award. I was kind of excited. I didn't expect a reward. I made a high B. I made an 88 in that class. The award was the could have been, should have been award. So you know, at the very, you know, when I look at this, here I am, a high schooler. I'm like, oh, okay, I could have been, should have been. She's not wrong because what I did going into high school.
Somebody gets sued today if they did that. You know that, right?
Well, that's a problem.
That is a problem.
Because
that's a great award.
Because this is a coach. She is coaching me. Because what did she see? She saw something other than my B. She saw potential.
Yeah.
And I set my goals too low.
Yeah.
I didn't do the work. I've always been this way at school. I can get by without doing the work.
Yeah. You just work the system.
You just work the system. And it's terrible. It's a terrible approach. And if somebody's not there to coach us and to call it out, what happens?
You build bad habits.
And you say, I'm successful. I made a B or even an A. I said I was going to make an A average in high school, going into high school. The lowest A at the time was a 93 average. So what did I graduate with? A 93 average.
Yep.
When I went to college, you think I would learn and do better. I went to chemical engineering. That's a pretty difficult course. It did stretch me. But I said, all right, what's the lowest honors? 3.25 is the lowest honors in chemical engineering at NC State. So what did I graduate with? A 3.257. So when I did what I could do to reach that particular goal, I stopped pushing myself, and I did not push myself to my limit. Therefore, I never failed, and because I never failed, I failed.
Yeah.
And I know that's a difficult thing to grasp. When I talk to people about this, I told you I was excited.
No.
They look at me funny. They look at me funny. Alexis, that's because that's the enemy, right?
Yeah, that's right. No, I mean, I love it. Like you had a goal, right? Whether it was,
I coasted, dude.
yeah, you did, but you met it and you stopped. And I don't know if I've shared the story of my daughter and her friend going on a beach trip, swimming in the pool to a point or not. But it makes me think of that story, right? We've all been in a pool to say, hey, I'm going to go underneath the water, see how far I can swim. So they both did that initially, and one friend outbeat the other. They didn't get all the way to the other side of the pool, and so I told them, hey, have your friend stand there, and you go under the water. Now you know the point to beat, and you pass. You see if you can pass her. Well, Evelyn beat her friend. So then Evelyn's friend's like, well, I think I can beat her now. There's a new goal. So guess what? Evelyn stayed there. Her friend beat her. Before we did this about 8 different times. Before I knew it, they were swimming across the pool and halfway back before but they weren't even meeting the other side. But what happened was they had met the goal, and the question is, are you okay with just stopping there? Or can you push it a little bit further? And you had a coach, your mentor, your teacher said you're the coulda, shoulda been award, right? like you didn't push yourself. Like you may have met your internal goal. Hey, I got to do this. My goal was to make A's and B's in school, because if I made a C, I get grounded. So guess what? I made A's and B's. I mean, I have a very similar story, but what does that look like? And as Christians, we're called to worship God and be a witness to the world. Those things require movement. Those things require offering everything of ourselves. And what, as we look at this, we are witnesses to the Lord. Like, what are we doing? How are we pushing ourselves? How do we respond to failure? How are we continuing to grow? How are we continuing to meet the standard that God sets for us? And we'll never meet that standard till we stand in front of Him in glory, right? We'll never be there because we're always going to fall short. That's why we need a Savior, right? That's why we need Jesus. But as we look at this, how do we instilling this in our kids' lives, coaching our kids through this, talking our kids through this is super critical.
It's a very good point, Charles. Success can hide complacency. And if we never stretch, we never discover what God may develop. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not because our worth comes from our performance, but because faithful stewardship requires growth. And as you were talking, I'm reminded about a story in Judges 6, and that's Gideon. There on Facebook, I was doom scrolling. I caught myself doom scrolling on Facebook the other night. I don't know why I do that. Somebody would say it's a dopamine hit, probably. You're addicted. I don't do it very often, but I was checking up on some people because they had messaged me on Messenger, and then I went to my Facebook page and I got caught doom scrolling. Well, one of the things that I came across was, what man of the Bible are you? And I thought to myself, no, I'm a little scared. I'm not going to take that quiz because it might say Gideon. I mean, I got the could have been, should have been award. So that's exactly what Gideon got. It's one of my favorite stories. And, Gideon is hiding in Judges 6. He's hiding. And how do we know he's hiding? It's because he's threshing wheat in the wine press. Yeah. So when you thresh wheat, you throw the stalks, the wheat up, and what happens? The wind blows the chaff away, and you're left with the grain. The grain's what you want. When you're in a wine press, where are you? You're in the ground. Yeah. So his people are at war, and Gideon's afraid. So he's down in the wine press threshing wheat. And God shows up, and God says, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Now, I have no idea what Gideon went through Gideon's mind. But if Dr. White would have showed up to me and said, "Good to see you, Mark, mighty chemist," I would have laughed. Yeah, I would have laughed because, I was not a mighty chemist. But God saw something more in Gideon. And to Gideon, it sounded absolutely ridiculous. He wasn't acting like a warrior. He was hiding. So what did Gideon do? He argued. He questioned. He delayed. He asked for signs. He did everything in his power not to yield. But he did eventually. Yeah. And when he finally moved, the people responded to his call. Many, many, many thousands show up. And then what does God do? He goes, no. We're going to send the majority of those home. You're going to be left with this very small group.
He reduced it down to
very small group.
Small group, yeah.
So this story isn't about Gideon becoming self-confident. I've heard many preachers talk about that. It isn't really about that, though. It's about Gideon discovering God's power through obedience. And when we stretch ourselves, it's not about building our self-confidence. I need no more self-confidence. If my head gets any bigger, my wife would tell you that there may be some repercussions.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty confident person. I hope it's not arrogance, but I mean, who knows?
Don't flirt the line.
But it's not, pushing myself is not about becoming more self-confident. It's about discovering God's power through His obedience, because God expects us to multiply. God expects us to reach out into the world. You outlined it perfectly. We're supposed to be worshiping. We're supposed to be witnessing. We're supposed to be working for Him. And this is where wisdom comes into play. Not all failure is completely healthy. You know? Gideon's failure wasn't healthy. He was hiding. It wasn't healthy at all at the beginning. His failure became a success, though, when he decided to take an action to it. So how do you tell the difference between healthy failure and unhealthy failure?
Yeah, I mean, you look at healthy and unhealthy failure. I mean, I believe healthy failures, I tried, I prepared, I learned, I adjusted, right? I mean, you got to reflect on those things, and also, like, what I hear you saying too is you're talking about Gideon and the failure, you know, and then what he moved into. He moved forward in obedience and faith as well. So there's a piece of that but there's movement, right? There's movement. You don't just stay there. Unhealthiness is I've coasted, right? I avoided, I blamed, I repeated. And the repeated piece just comes back to me because I see time and time again we want to do the same thing, expect different results, right? And that's the definition of insanity. You do the same thing, expect different results. So as we look at failure, you got to move into it. You got to learn from it. And I'm not saying that sometimes whenever we fail, there's a warning there. Sometimes whenever we fail, I believe the Lord's warning us and saying, that's not where you need to be. But then there's failure that teaches us. And how do we determine, even the difference between those two? Do we go back to the healthy and unhealthy in those? Because I do think that there's failure of warning and there's failure that teaches. But in both cases, you got to step back and say, why did this happen? What's going on? What's my purpose? Am I doing what the Lord wants me to do? Am I honoring the Lord in what I'm doing? Because if you're not honoring the Lord in it, then that's a warning saying, stop.
Well, I didn't talk to Dr. Watt.
Yeah.
I was at least wise enough to have a conversation and giggle about it with her. But she asked herself a question about her students. And that first question was their effort present? In other words, did they try? And when she came down to me, she said, did Mark try? And the answer to that question was no. Unhealthy failure. But I was a success. I made a B. I passed the class. No, unhealthy failure. So I think that's a question we have to ask for ourselves and our children. When our children get into something and they fail, did they actually put forth effort? Did they try? Because if they tried and they put their effort into it, then did they really fail? That's question number one. And then the next one is, what's the goal? And is it a stretch? So were you stretching? My goal in high school was to graduate with a 93 average, which I did. Success or failure? Failure. Why? Healthy or unhealthy? Unhealthy. Why? Because I wasn't stretching myself. In 8th grade, I graduated in the top 3 of my class.
Yeah.
There's 2 of us with the exact same grade. One person was 1/10 of a point more. You couldn't get more close to 100. One graduated or graduated. Listen, now we say graduated now. And
everybody graduates every year.
We shouldn't do that. But I ended the 8th grade with a 99.8 average on all my classes. That was my average grade. I mean, I made 100 in every single class except for one. And the person who was ahead of us was 1/10 of a point closer to 100.
So success or failure?
Success.
Why?
I was stretching. I was pushing myself. I was actually doing the work and the homework. And
You gave your best.
I wanted it to be 100.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be 100. Get to high school, 93. Didn't try. You know what I did in I feel bad about this. You know what I did in English class? I had the highest grade in my English class. It was a college prep class. It wasn't honors. Go figure. Brand new teacher. Really excited. He drove an older Porsche, and I like sports cars, so I drum up a lot of conversations with him. And he was showing me his car and how he'd worn out third gear and all that good stuff. But he was really into English, and he was really wanting to make a difference. So we took a test. He said, I'm very disappointed in the majority of y'all. Y'all can do better, but Mark, good job. Good job. He gave me my grade. It's an A. Well, somebody ratted me out. You're not supposed to rat out on your friends, but they will. If Ashley's watching this, your dad will find out.
It'll come full circle.
Will rat you out. Yeah. And the next day, he said, Mark, did you read that book, Tale of Two Cities? Well, I'm many things, but my father pretty well made sure I'm not a liar on purpose. Yeah. And I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking about this, Charles.
Yeah,
do I say yes? That's the easy answer.
Yeah.
Of course I
read
did.
it, man.
I didn't.
2 times.
Yeah. I didn't read that book. I read the first chapter. Mm-hmm. I read the last chapter.
Knew how it started, knew how it ended.
And I read the Cliff Notes.
Yeah.
I had to look at him in the face and say, no, I'm sorry, I did not read that. How did you pass the test? I said, I read the first chapter, the last chapter, and then I read the Cliff Notes. He said, now, Mark, there was a couple questions in there that's not in the Cliff Notes because I made sure of it. And I said, yeah, but if you read the first page and the last page of each chapter, you're in better shape.
Did you do that too?
Not all of them, but
some
I just happened to get the right ones.
Just happened to get the right ones, yeah. Oh, I bet that burnt him up.
It's terrible. It's terrible, and we're laughing about it now.
Yeah.
But the world, my peers like success, but in actuality, it's a complete failure. So we were asking questions. Did you truly try? Did your child try? Were they stretching? Were you stretching? Well, what about this one? Did they make excuses? Because if you make excuses, it's a failure. Yeah. It's an unhealthy failure.
It's everybody else's fault.
What does excuses do for you?
Nothing. Yeah, I can't stand excuses. So, those are good. What, any others?
Well, failure should leave wisdom. So what did you learn from it? Yeah. And what did you do after you failed? Yeah. I think those are the 5 questions. Did you truly try? Did you stretch? Did you make excuses? Failure should leave wisdom. Did you learn? And then what did you do? Did you adjust or did you quit?
As I listen to you read through those questions, I think we want to immediately move to action sometimes. You may think, whoa, what are you talking about? We either move away from it or we don't move into it. But if you ask those questions before the action piece comes, you then know what you got to work on. Like, I didn't try. If I did try, then what's the next thing? Did I make excuses? If I didn't make excuses, then, as you walk through those questions, it leads you to what type of action you have to make. It may not be that, hey, I did try my best, but, none of my shots went in. So what I got to do? Well, I tried my best at the game, but I got to practice harder if I want a different result, right? Like those questions before tell you what type of action you have to take as you reflect. So I think as we look at our failures, and parents, as we look at our failures, as we look at our kids walking through failure, we got to ask those questions so we know how to act.
We'll know the answers to those questions will show us where we need to coach.
Yeah.
And we need to coach as parents.
Yeah.
What happens today, I see it all the time, is that we don't coach as parents. What we do is we solve the problem for them.
Yeah.
We don't let them stretch. We don't push them to stretch. We don't lead them to get out of their comfort zone. So what happens? What happens? You're actually coaching your child to be complacent and take the easy road.
And to rely on somebody else.
And they'll never reach their full potential.
No.
Because they don't have to.
Yeah.
Somebody's always there to bail them out. So what do you think we should teach our children then? What are the main coaching points of, as we wrap this to a close? I know we're getting a little long in this episode.
I mean, as we look at that, I think do hard things. I mean, it's okay to step into something that's difficult and to even step into it knowing that, hey, I may not succeed from the get-go, but do hard things. Take wise risks. It doesn't mean that we walk into something that's just completely dangerous or irresponsible. We got to take wise risks. We have to stretch. We have to learn. We have to trust God in it. There's a faith component in this that as we move into it, sometimes we may just have to slow down and wait and pause and say, God, like look at Gideon's example, right? Show me, confirm, like show me what this looks like. I think those are huge. We got to be careful to sit in the comfort and the ease of things. We're made to do hard things. Our kids were made for this moment and this time, and I hear people say this a lot. I can't believe this is the way the world is and our kids are in it. No, like they were created. God put them in this space for this time and this moment, put us as parents in this space for this time and this moment so that we can raise godly kids that love the Lord and that are made to do hard things. So just pursuing growth. We must pursue growth.
Well, Charles, I think that's awesome. I've been real excited to talk about this subject. I believe it's one subject that all of our teenagers, while I was leading the youth ministry, it was very important for them to understand that comfort is a place of rest and not a place to live. So we gotta keep pushing for growth. Failure is not the enemy. Complacency is. And it can be overcome by purpose and relying on God. Thank you, Charles.
Thanks, Mark.